Just seconds after takeoff in Algeria, a Saudia Boeing 777 ploughs through a flock of birds. The nose cone and the engines turn completely red, but the crew of Flight SV340 decides to carry on to their destination Jeddah. Why keep flying, and should they have landed back immediately? Stay tuned. On the 25th of October, Saudia Flight SV340 departs from Algeria, bound for Jeddah, on board a Boeing 777-300ER. The flight began in the early morning hours, after a standard passenger boarding, baggage loading, and pre-departure briefing. The weather at takeoff was reported as calm, with no significant turbulence or bird hazard warnings. As the aircraft taxied to runway 09 at Algiers and began its takeoff roll, the crew followed normal procedures. The engine spooled up, the systems were checked in the cockpit, flaps were set for departure, and then SV340 lifted off. The climb out was normal, and the crew reported no anomalies during the early phase of departure. As SV340 continued its initial climb, shortly after passing approximately 500 feet above the ground level, at this point, the crew noticed a sudden loud impact on the nose region of the aircraft, and the crew called out a Birdstrike. After assessing the engine parameters, they decided to continue their climb to their cruise altitude. After the impact, the crew monitored all their systems. Their engine N1 and N2 values remained within limits. There were no fire warnings, and there was no ECAM failure associated with the major systems. The aircraft then reached its cruising altitude uneventfully. On landing at Jeddah, maintenance inspection confirmed damage to the radome skin and underlying structure. Instead of returning back to Algiers or diverting soon after the strike, the crew decided to continue to Jeddah. The aircraft was fully controllable, the engines and flight control systems were unaffected, the destination airport offered full maintenance support, and the weather and routing were acceptable. The flight landed safely in Jeddah and then taxied to the gate without any incidents. No injuries were reported to any of the passengers or crew. So SV340 lands safely this time around. But how common are these strikes, and when do they become truly dangerous? In the United States alone, the FAA recorded 19,000 wildlife strikes in 2023. The reporting has also increased over the decades as the systems have improved. Globally, there's been more than 270,000 reports of strikes from 2016 onwards to the present. So this is a routine aviation hazard that the industry manages every day. It's important to remember that most bird or wildlife strikes are not catastrophic. In fact, FAA numbers show that only a small percentage cause significant aircraft damage. Still, with tens of thousands of such events, even a small percentage matters for safety and cost. But then, when things do go wrong, they can go terribly wrong. Take for instance the US Airways Flight 1549 case, popularly known as the Miracle on the Hudson. An Airbus A320 taking off from New York in 2009 strikes a flock of Canada geese just shortly after takeoff. They lose thrust in both their engines and then have to ditch in the Hudson River nearby. Luckily, all 155 people survived. More recently though, bird strikes have led to engine fires or diversions. In March this year, a FedEx 767 returned immediately back to New York after a strike triggered an engine fire. Again, this was a safe outcome. About 40% of the impacts hit the engines, with a similarly large share distributed between the nose, radome, and the windscreens. This explains why you often see damaged radomes or blood-spattered noses in photos. But with Saudia SV340, they were incredibly lucky to not have any birds damage their engines. The damage in this case was purely on the radome. A radome is a composite sandwich structure and is engineered to be transparent to the weather radar. Bird or hail impacts can damage the skin or the honeycomb core, sometimes with minimal external clues, and that can lead to delamination or radar faults later down the line. That's why manufacturers like Boeing and Airbus stress that detailed inspections after such strikes are carried out. Generally, after such an incident, the crews will check the aircraft condition and operational risk. If both the engines are normal, the flight controls are working, and there is no fluid leak or smoke, then in this case, the crew can decide to carry on with their flight to their destination. This decision is also cross-checked and confirmed with the airline's maintenance center. Regulators actually require that both the airframe and the engine are resilient to bird strikes. Several standards exist that require the aircraft to remain capable of a continued safe flight and landing after a single bird impact on critical structures. Overall, the location of the bird strike plays a huge role in determining if a flight ends up in trouble or not. In this case, Saudia SV340 got lucky. A double engine ingestion of the birds and failure would have been catastrophic.